The book Rooting for Rivals casts a powerful vision. It describes how taking a generous, collaborative approach towards others, even with our competitors and potential rivals, can turn the world on its head. Doing that is not just the right thing to do, it can dramatically expand the good fruit of our work. That all sounds great, right? But this kind of rare open-handedness doesn't come naturally to any of us. Sure, we'll help out when the cost is fairly low or the payoff of collaboration is high, but to root for rivals even when the cost feels steep and we get little credit and the payoff feels small, well, that's another matter. That kind of generosity only comes from something much deeper. On this episode, we have the opportunity to hear from Peter Greer on the deeper choices that help grow us into the kind of people who not only can go the distance in long, hard journeys of justice and mercy, but also who can sincerely root for rivals along the way.
Welcome to Justice and the Inner Life, presented by the Christian Alliance for Orphans. We'll explore what it takes to sustain a heart of justice and mercy over a lifetime. Here's your host, Jedd Medefind.
Well, I am here with Peter Greer, and the truth is, I am not just looking forward to this conversation, but I'm also excited for more people to get to know you personally, Peter. Peter is an articulate speaker, he's an author, an effective leader, the head of an organization that I greatly respect, Hope International. But more than that, what I value most about Peter is what I observe and have experienced in his character, his heart, warmth, open-handedness, winsome, great question asker. So Peter, welcome to Justice and the Inner Life.
This is a tremendous privilege. Thanks so much for having me on.
All right. So Peter, just so folks can get you to know you a little bit better, tell us first just a little about your family.
Yeah, so I am husband to Laurel and dad to Keith, Lily, and Miles. And I love that that's how we're starting this conversation, because those are my most important titles and job descriptions of being husband and dad to this family. We've also been active in foster care and also international adoption. And so on so many levels, not just the professional level with Hope International, but also with our family and adoption and foster care, very much appreciate the support, friendship, community of CAFO as well. So that is our family.
Yeah. And you know, we were talking just before, of course, we started recording here, but about how so often these, what seem to be different spheres from the outside, really intertwine. The local engagement with kids in foster care, supporting family restoration here in the United States, but then inter-country adoption, and then serving in countries all over the world, so often come intertwined. And I love how you have lived that, and that's the core, that's your heartbeat.
Yeah, well, I have so much appreciation for Laurel, my wife, and really the local engagement has been something that she has been passionate about as a leader in our home and in our community. And I have so much appreciation for the way that she opened my eyes and my heart to some of the needs that were not just far away, but also the needs that were right around us in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And the foster care journey that we've been on has our eyes and our hearts have been open through this process as well. So I agree with that and love that this is not an either or. Do we care about kids far away, or do we care about kids that are in our own backyard? We don't have to choose on that oftentimes. And it is possible to have a local and a global application of what it means to love God and to love our neighbors.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit about how you're living that internationally, because that's a big part of your work today, your day job, maybe your night job too sometimes with Hope International. Tell us just a little bit about that work.
Yeah, sure. So we're really focused on the microenterprise development space. And so I know a lot of listeners are very familiar with this as a tool, but really the basic premise and the founding story of Hope International was a church partner that was receiving aid and a lot of good things. And that was so right. It was so appropriate for a time of crisis. But there became a different time, and the time shifted from being a time when the greatest need was relief to the greatest need became how can this community become empowered to use their own gifts and abilities to provide for individuals in their community. And so it really was a pastor in Ukraine that said, your help isn't helping us anymore. And so shifted the conversation and shifted from an approach that was primarily about meeting immediate needs, which again is so good and right, to a model that was looking at the gifts, capacity, resources that individuals already had in their community and walking alongside in helping individuals start small businesses. And so kind of the summary of Hope International is we introduce individuals to the hope of Jesus, and we help provide jobs and employment in places of financial poverty. So Jesus and jobs is maybe the most concise way to talk about what we do, but operate in 16 countries. We serve about 900,000 families, and really excited to see this growing conversation of realizing that part of the way that we care for individuals includes thinking about employment. It includes the gift of work. It includes the idea that individuals around the world have the same heart to reach out and care for individuals in their communities. And so how can we empower them to do that? So that's my day job, having an incredible team of Hope International and remarkable partners here and around the world, and so privileged to do this work together.
Absolutely. Love that. And, and of course, while some may think, okay, what does this have to do with orphans and the Christian Alliance for Orphans? Well, I believe absolutely everything, that when we look at this full spectrum and say, it all starts with trying to keep families together. If that is possible, if kids can grow up with their biological parents, that's always the first goal. And Hope is an organization that plays a critical role for hundreds of thousands of families, enabling them to thrive so that those kids don't end up orphaned or needing a new place, which sometimes happens. And then Christians are called in to step into that space too. But this is where it all starts. So really grateful for that work, Peter.
I appreciate that. And just one real interesting thing that we've seen time and time again is it's not just that if you help a mom and dad have more of an income that they are able to provide for their children. What we have seen with Hope International is as individuals have more resources in the community, they're ready to care for vulnerable children in their community as well. So it's not just about strengthening the family and making sure that poverty is not a reason why kids are separated from moms and dads, but it actually is seeing that there is a local response as well as individuals have more means. I love celebrating the stories. I think of Severa, who started this entrepreneurial venture, and now she has adopted 8 orphans in her community there.
Wow.
And so I celebrate that. And those entrepreneurs that we serve around the world, seeing their generosity, seeing their faith in action, they're an inspiration for us, for me and my family to say, how can we do more? So I love the family strengthening, and also with more economics, with a little more financial resources. I love watching how they are opening up their home to more and more kids as well.
Amen. That's great, Peter. That is the vision, right? It's the local church in every place being the first answer for those young people who need that love and support. And just a little more, what kind of drew you to this in the first place? Because I know you spent some time in the business world, but the bulk of your life's vocation up to this point has been serving folks around the world. What kind of woke your heart to that in the first place?
Yeah, so I had the incredible gift of having a mom and dad who did not just read the Bible, but they lived it. They lived what they read, and very much an outward expression of their faith. And part of that was going on trips around the world and seeing the issues. And growing up, I felt a little bit of this disconnect, though, because I had an interest in business and entrepreneurship. And at that time, it kind of, when you look back, you realize maybe how crazy this was. But I never really connected the issue of of poverty and lack of discipleship and all of these issues, I never saw business as more than the funding mechanism. And today I realize, how wrong, how much I missed out. And I love that there's so many more examples to celebrate of people that say our faith influences everything that we do, and business is a powerful tool that we have to address so many of these other issues that we care about. And so I love that. And so when I first heard about microfinance and microenterprise development, I was in Russia, and it captured my interest. But my interest wasn't just in microfinance, but there was this absence of the church seeing these tools. And so really, I would say my career has been spent on not just how do we grow and learn and improve these tools of savings groups and microfinance institutions and small and medium enterprises, but how do we use them within the church as a way to address, yes, the physical poverty, but also the spiritual poverty. And so microenterprise development, but also as a church, remembering our full and complete mission that we have and trying to bring these worlds that sometimes can feel separate, to bring them together. And again, maybe it doesn't work, but for me, this idea of Jesus and jobs, it resonates with me about this idea for the church to see employment as a key part in the way for us to love God and to love our neighbor.
Yeah. The work isn't just a necessary evil, but it's actually something that preceded the fall, and and we find in many ways some of our richest joys and purposes in life in discovering that, right?
Yeah, well said. Why are you more eloquent talking about this than I am?
You're the man on this, but I love learning from you. Well, okay, so let's dig into the leadership element just a little bit, Peter, because you are not only a leader, but I really see you as a student of leadership and leaders, and you've written on a number of important leadership themes. And I would say something I have felt just so keenly recently is a longing to see more Christian leaders who look like Jesus. People whose presence feels like the grace and winsomeness and attentiveness that Jesus continually lived. And I could be wrong, but I think that's probably what most of us are yearning for. Not just impressive speakers or witty writers with big platforms, or sharp executives with great skills, but women and men whose character really feels like that presence of the grace and calm and goodness of Jesus. And sometimes that's hard to find. And I'm wondering, because you interact with so many great folks, as I do in this realm and beyond, are there certain threads that you see in the lives of people where you really notice that Jesus-like presence, certain common threads or elements in their lives and habits and choices?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting because I think part of what I have seen and observed is the leaders that I have the greatest amount of respect for. The one maybe common characteristic is they understand how much they need Jesus. They understand that all of this and a bigger platform without Jesus simply means a bigger place to fall from. And there's this understanding, but and reliance on the grace of God. And because of that, there is a walking with humility. Because of that, there's structures that they set in place to say, God, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Help that not happen to me. I need you each and every hour. I need you. And so this position of dependency, this position of understanding the need to receive God's grace before we can ever give God's grace is a consistent theme in the leaders that I have the greatest amount of respect for. And then I think the other interesting piece is individuals that also aren't afraid to admit when they get it wrong or they don't have it all together. That is another consistent theme, and it's almost like the more confidence we have in receiving God's grace, we can stop pretending that we all have it all together. We can stop pretending that somehow there is this separate category of individual, this separate class, and instead there is this wonderful acknowledgement of, Yeah, and let me boast in my weakness, because when I boast in my weakness, it is so clear that this good that is happening, this is not from my intelligence, it's not from my strength, but let me tell you the story of Jesus. So I love the outward focus, I love the boasting in weakness, and I love the recognition that without God's grace, with this work, this impact, it is impossible on our own.
Well said. So well said. It does strike me that it seems like so often in history, whether looking over the last 2,000 years or looking at the biblical record, so many of those whom God has used in really significant ways, there was a time of crisis, or at least what we would say a time in the wilderness prior to that significant work. And often literal wilderness, right? You think of Moses spending 40 years chasing sheep in the desert, and how that must have felt like such a profound loss, where he had a heart for justice, right? And he was stepping up, and then ended up running away from Egypt and chasing sheep. And of course David was shepherd and running from Saul, and even Jesus had his 40 days in the wilderness. And so it seems like that is what a common thread that cultivates precisely what you're talking about, right? The humility, that sense of utter dependence, the sense that I do not have all that it takes to be a great leader and need to draw from a source beyond myself.
Yeah. Once again, well said. Can I ask you a couple questions here, and we just shift the podcast? That's
Sorry, that's not the deal here, Peter. Oh man.
No, well said. Yeah.
Well, Peter, I know, speaking of moments of wilderness, I know, and you've been very transparent about a time when you were leading well, you were doing great work. I think everyone from the outside would have said Peter is killing it, but you experienced a time of serious exhaustion, even burnout. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, one thing to have a conversation with you, Jedd. Another thing to talk about this with the listeners here as well. But no, it was a time, and it was a time of rapid growth. And looking back on it, I was more excited about growing an organization than I was about recognizing the gift that it was to grow a family. Looking back, it was very easy to look at the way that I was spending my time, the way that I was spending my energy, and to realize that I was giving my family leftovers. And again, so thankful to have Laurel in my life. She is by far the most influential person in my life. And I did not fully realize how much my life was going to be on a different and better track after she said I do. And so at this time, she called me on it, and she sat me down and said, "Peter, I love you. Peter, I'm committed to you, but I don't feel anything for you anymore." And that was a turning point in my life. It was a turning point in my marriage. And in many ways, she helped me begin the dismantling process of having too much of my identity wrapped up in what I was doing vocationally, and missing out on this high and holy calling, not just to be involved in external service, but to be involved in loving the people that are closest to me. And the stats are overwhelming. There are too many of us that are involved in Christian ministry, leadership of one type of another, who are doing great things externally, and yet there is a sense of resentment that is growing and building at home. And my heart breaks for that. I can feel a little bit of that based on my experience. I can feel how easy it is for that to happen, and yet I want to be someone who has this integrity of what we do externally matches what is not just happening internally in our heart, but also under our roof and with the people that are closest to us, that they also are realizing their worth and their value even more than sometimes the things that might capture headlines of external service. I am more and more convinced that what we do at home is more important than anything that we do outside as well.
And Peter, why do you feel like we, and I say we sincerely, not just you, but me, and of course many other leaders, women and men, often do put more emotional energy, more attention, more focus on those things that are far away rather than those that are near.
Yeah, once again, I want to flip the question on you, Jedd, because I want to hear your answer to that. You've been doing such good thinking on this, and I remember hearing you talk about some of these. But, maybe part of it is the myth of our own importance, that the work that we're doing externally is we're the only person that could do it. So we don't delegate. We don't empower others because look how important I am. Maybe it's from a sense of missing out actually in our theology of God's calling on our lives. And maybe we do a little bit too much of equating this external service with what it means to actually follow Jesus wholeheartedly and miss out on what's closest to home. Maybe it's that we get more accolades or external praise from the work that we do, and we don't get that same amount of perhaps recognition by doing the dishes, even though that probably is the most important thing we should be doing at that moment. So I think there's lots of reasons, but seriously, Jedd, why do you think that is?
I would resonate with everything you said. I think there's, both a good as well as negative impulse towards wanting to do big things for God, do big things for justice. And so we get caught up in these projects and programs. We may want to go look towards government. Here living in Washington, D.C., I feel like there's an impulse. You don't want to work with a shovel, right? You want to get behind a big earth mover because you can do more good that way. And so you orient towards government or big machines like NGOs rather than that small, faithful love of the neighbor. And there's, again, good reasons for that, right? We want to do a lot of good, but I think so often that really does then pull us away from loving those nearest. And I know for myself, sometimes I just even have to confess that it is actually easier, to love someone or some issue that is far away than to love those that are nearest, right? You can control that environment. You can put in what you want, but then nothing more, right? Where when you're seeking to work out a fight or a conflict with your buddy or with your spouse, of course, or your children, there's a conflict or difficulty, or just waking up in the middle of the night to feed a baby. Those things, in some ways, are much harder than running an organization or doing something in the far off and abstract. I think there may be one other really important factor here, too. At least I know this is true in my own life. And that is the question of where we get our sense of identity from. I know for me, when I am finding my identity and sense of self-worth in my reputation, in how others see me, in whether I feel that I'm accomplishing meaningful things, when my identity is found in those things, it really becomes hard to do those small, humble acts of service that aren't likely to build my resume, that won't get any credit or praise in public. That is just, it's almost impossible to joyfully do those things when my identity is coming externally. But when my identity is rooted in the fact that I am the beloved child of God, completely apart from anything I'm going to accomplish or achieve or my reputation, then I feel like that really frees us to love and serve joyfully, even in things that won't be noticed, changing a diaper, preparing a meal, helping someone when it's never likely to get public attention. It frees us to do those things joyfully because our identity is already set. It's not hinging on the next book we write or speech we give or organization we lead or any of those things. What a gift that is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that is absolutely true. Yeah. Jedd, one of the things that I did, never wanting to go back to that point, was wrote my resignation letter and gave it to Laurel, so that if she ever did feel that I was not being the dad or husband, which is my higher calling, then vocationally what I do, that I would walk away from a job that I really do love. I love what I get to do, but I love my family more. And so if there was ever that conflict, I wanted to make it very clear that there is not a choice between where my higher love is. It is God, it is Laurel, it is kids, and then it is work. Making sure that resignation letter has been a simple way to make sure that I don't confuse that again.
Well, we will circle back on this theme in a couple different ways, but it just strikes me, Peter, that, what the world needs most from Christian leaders, and this is you and I and pastors and homemakers and school teachers and social workers, what the world needs most is not just kind of effective leadership skills. It needs wholehearted leaders. People who can bring, again, that the presence of Jesus, the love, the attentiveness, the gentleness, the calm. And we won't be doing that if our home life is, a tertiary priority for us. And so it strikes me that if we're deeply committed to our leadership roles, if you're deeply committed to leading Hope well, then that really does start with a wholeheartedness at home that flows upward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What did, Peter, you already alluded to the letter, which I loved that example, and just the tangibleness of that and the practicalness of that. Are there any other steps you took at that point to get back to a place of health?
Yeah, there are several. And, the first thing that I did is I thought that just going away for a weekend, just the two of us, would bring some sort of healing to years of a pattern that was well established. And not surprisingly, that didn't work. and because it was long term. And so it takes a long term commitment and a lot of hard work to have a great, vibrant relationship. And so a couple of practical things. One is within the sphere of international development, travel is a bear. It is part of the job, but it is a bear to manage. And so we established a travel cap, not just for me, but everyone on staff with Hope International, that we want to make sure that people are saying no to good opportunities and saying yes to the best opportunities to be home. So we have a travel cap for everyone, that no one is away from home more than 75 nights a year, which again, in international development, that is a crazy low number. And so the second thing is I wanted to know how I'm doing as a husband and dad. So this might seem a little bit crazy, but started asking Laurel through a series of 10 questions, how am I doing being a husband and a dad? And I wanted to know, am I headed in the right direction? And it's true. For any organization, we have our KPIs, our key performance indicators. But I had never asked Laurel, hey, how am I doing showing that I honor and cherish you? I never asked how well we're parenting together. And so I created a system where quarterly I ask Laurel some key questions of how I'm doing. Third thing is to make sure that I am home at a certain time, and it counts as one of my nights away if I'm not home at that. And then in a connected world, I literally am separated from my phone. It goes in the drawer because I just don't even want the temptation. I am unavailable when I get home until after my kids are in bed. And that is the family time. Yeah. And those simple things, again, you've spoken on them. They're simple things, but I just commend them to actually making it happen. And I've so appreciated, I know you've had some engagement as well with Praxis, but they created this little rule of life for redemptive entrepreneurs, and I just wholeheartedly endorse it. It's a free download if anyone wants it, but it's a lot of these simple, practical things to frame the work that we do within the broader context of God's redemptive work. Remember our place in it, and out of that to change some of the habits and the ways and the practices that we do to make sure we have a rootedness, we have a groundedness, we have practicals, we have a rule of life that is going to allow us to do this good work, but to do it in such a way that the ones closest to us do not pay a price that I believe they are not asked to pay.
Well, we'll share that rule of life on the show notes for this. And let me ask you too, Peter, the questions that you asked your wife, do you ever share those as well?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share them as well.
I think that'd be great for anyone to do, right?
Sure, absolutely. I won't share my scores on them, but I'm happy to share
okay. We won't go
questions.
There. In terms of the technology, you mentioned cell phone when you get home. I have the same habit. The phone is out of reach from the time I arrive home until the kids are in bed. Do you have any other tech rules that you have set in terms of keeping technology in its proper place?
We've read The Tech-Wise Family by Andy Crouch. Yep. We have tried to implement some of those things, the idea of a Sabbath, no screens, limit time, always in, spaces, family spaces, not in rooms. And Yeah, so I feel like there's nothing kind of new or innovative. It's more, I think that our kids are going to tell us what we did wrong in 10 years on this, but trying to figure it out. And I think the big thing with that is there an intentionality of making sure that we are not replacing the human with the digital experience. I commend Andy Crouch's book. Found that super helpful. We do have a contract of the rules of engagement for technology in our home, but I would very much say we're all still trying to figure this one out as parents.
Yeah. I really do feel like the use of tech is one of the most significant choices we'll make today, in terms of where we allow it and where we don't allow it in our lives. And I know for myself, the one you mentioned specifically of when I get home from work, just being fully present with the family. And then for me, first thoughts in the morning. I know if I wake up and look at my phone and have it on, someone else is deciding what those precious first thoughts of the day are going to be. And it's going to be some problem, some crisis, whether it's a news feed, whether it's Twitter, and so I turn on airplane mode when I go to bed, a little while before I go to bed, so that my last thoughts of the day are also not determined by others, and then leave it that way until I've spent a little time with the Lord at least, and then allow other people to jump into my brain and tell me what to think about.
That is so good. That is one of the Praxis Rule of Life principles as well, is Scripture before technology as well. I love that. So, Peter, your most recent book, Rooting for Rivals, which I would recommend to anyone here. Some might see that book as a very different conversation than what we've just been talking about family health, about spiritual health, about soul vitality. But I know you believe, and I believe, these themes are really inseparable. So we'll get to that in a minute. But first, just give us the core argument of Rooting for Rivals. And my guess is that we all feel the division in our world, right? It's almost impossible not to feel it. We are living at a moment in time where there is a whole lot of division, and I believe that the experience of individuals looking at the church is an invitation to say, is there a different picture? Or is the same division that is out there, is it also within the church? And if we're honest, it is in there, the division within the church, and maybe we're a little subtle in the way we talk about, let me tell you how my ministry is different from that other organization. In a subtle way, let me tell you why my approach is better than the others. Let me tell you why, if you're really serious about addressing orphans and vulnerable, let me tell you why this approach is going to be the very best one. Let me tell you. And what does that do? It sends a message to a world that this level of division is no different within the church, and that stands in such stark contrast to the prayer in John 17, where Jesus prays that we may be one. And so my heart, my hope is that we would act, we would serve, we would live differently. And so we interviewed the very best, most generous leaders that we could find, individuals that had a different approach. And what we found is they answered some questions differently from the rest of the world. And the first was they believed and lived as if their mission did not stop at the organizational boundaries. They had clarity that they were to seek first the kingdom of God. They had clarity that it wasn't just about one organization, but it was the expansive kingdom of God. And then the second piece is they believed in a world of abundance, not scarcity. They refused to look at someone else's success as somehow threatening, meaning there's less for them. And so it really was a discovery process to learn from some of the best, most generous, most open-handed leaders, individuals that model a posture of uncommon unity, and to say, what are they doing differently? What do they believe and what do they do? And how can we have more of that within the church today, where we act, we live, we serve as if we are on the same team, and not these little divided sub-clans that actually undermine our broader and more important mission that we have as followers of Jesus.
So good. Give us one example, just a place where you saw an uncommon open-handedness.
Yeah, one of the best things about this book and the writing process was my eyes have been open to some really great and creative options that people are doing to live this out. And again, Capo is awesome in the way that it is bringing together all kinds of organizations. No egos, no logos. Let's come together for a bigger cause and let's develop friendships. And so I celebrate, Jedd, what is happening and what you have been leading in an important moment in time. And so I really do see that as an example, and I celebrate. One of the other maybe well-known examples that's happening right now is that there was a foundation executive that told me that he had a few years ago 3 different Bible translation organizations come together, and they were each pitching the same translation. They were pitching the same people group. Everything was the same. And this unnecessary replication was slowing down the ability for Scripture to be in every language. So a group of donors, a group of organizations came together, and initially they thought the Bible was going to be translated into every language by the year 2150. Now it's on track to be done by the year 2033. They took 117 years off of the pace of progress simply because they were willing to develop relationships. They were willing to create a database to make some of this information available, the Illuminations Project. And 117 years, that's multiple generations that now we're going to have Scripture in their language because of this uncommon willingness to partner, to collaborate, and to have a vision that extended beyond the organizational boundaries. And what is true in Bible translation is true in orphan care. What is true in poverty alleviation, it is true in college ministry. It is true in every sector that it is possible for us to accomplish more together than we ever could alone.
Well said. Well said. And I love how you articulate there and in the book that this is not just the right thing to do, but it is, of course. And it's not just showing the world that unity which God intends the church to show, which it does, but it really is more fruitful. And like you're describing, I have the privilege of seeing this day after day when organizations that are serving vulnerable children do leave their logos and egos at the door, as imperfectly as we're always going to do that as humans, but really seeking to do that, coming together and joining in shared initiatives. It is so beautiful to see the good fruit.
Yeah, it really is. And again, the best part of the whole writing project was after the book was released, getting emails of other individuals saying, let me tell you about another example where I'm seeing this right now. So far from being pessimistic about the increased cutthroat competition that is oozing into the Christian ministry, nonprofit world, I am seeing a different tide of collaboration, partnership, and I am thrilled to see that continue to grow. And as a result, again, be more fruitful, as you just said, and impact more kids, more families around the world.
Yeah. Peter, I haven't mentioned this to you before, but I was thinking a little while back about if I were to go back in time to, when I was relatively new to the Christian Alliance for Orphans world and working with a lot of organizations. And if I were to have made a list of the, 5 or 10 organizations that were most open-handed, that I saw always willing to, do a phone call with a newcomer or share something they developed free of charge, help out behind the scenes. Of course, many of these organizations help the infrastructure of the Christian Alliance for Orphans, providing office space, providing staff volunteers at various key moments, sharing resources in a lot of different ways without asking for, hey, but can my logo be on the front? Or, without asking for credit, they just truly are the most open-handed. And then if we're not that I would ever do this, but we're to kind of think in my mind of those who were the least that way, not bad people or bad organizations, but just a little more concerned about their turf and their territory and their brand. If I were to put those two groups on a list, if I had done that 8 years ago, today, and I think about that, those groups that were the most open-handed then, those are the ones that have grown the most. And I think that it's both God's blessing as well as kind of a law of His universe that open-handedness, that sowing of seed just brings good fruit. And it is just beautiful to see.
Yeah. And I think you're right. It is kingdom economics. He who sows generously, reaps generously. And that actually would be a fascinating study over time, because I really do think, it's the right thing to do, regardless of results. It's the right thing to do. But the results, I would not be surprised if that idea was replicated in a variety of different spaces. And again, this idea of, is it abundance or is it a scarcity mindset? There is more than enough for all. 5 loaves and 2 fish, they've always been enough when Jesus is involved.
Yes. So let's now kind of tie this back into the conversation about soul health and that the inner life. It strikes me that it is so important that if we hope to be the kind of people who can do what we're talking about, consistently root for rivals, not just when everyone's noticing and we say, look how unselfish I am, I'm putting this other, but really those times when it hurts, right? When someone else is kind of going to get credit for some good stuff we did, and, our donors aren't going to know, and, and it really feels like something to our loss. That's where the rub happens, and that's where it takes more than just a success ethic, right? It's got to come from something deep, from some soul health and a connection to Jesus Christ, I believe, that is the wellspring of all of that. And so I'm just curious what you would see. Are there certain habits, rhythms of life that actually may underlie this good fruit you're describing in terms of rooting for rivals?
Yeah, and I think there is unquestionably a connection between the idea that it's all about me, it's all about my organization, it's all about my performance, and burnout. Yes. You take on, and eventually you crack. And the irony, it's almost like what we were just talking about, the individual leaders that have this idea that, we're doing something beyond our capacity. We're doing something that would be impossible to accomplish alone. And therefore, let's figure out who else is doing it, who else can carry the load, who else we can partner with, who else we can join hands with in this good and important work. That actually refreshes your soul and means that you don't have to take on everything. So there probably is a separate correlation between this idea of maybe inflated importance. If I don't do it, it will never get done. And actually going to the dangerous place of burnout. And Jedd, one thing that connects just with my season that was really, really a challenging season, is the craziest thing happened, that when I started having limits, instead of feeling constrained, I felt free. And instead of, support going down because I couldn't show up at every event, support went up because other members of the team did a better job communicating the mission of the organization, and you're able to do more. And so instead of decline, it actually opened up doors to incredible health and vitality and growth in a season that I am thrilled to be in, and some new partnerships that we have. It's opened up. We have a new partnership with Compassion International that I am thrilled about, where we're going to do more together than we ever could think of doing alone. And to the list of other friends that have come along and the gift of those friendships, it is a season of freedom and growth and vitality. As we become more and more open-handed and seeking to think beyond just the organization. So there's some correlation between, I've got to do it all and burnout versus there's no way I can or should do it all, and freedom and greater growth and greater impact.
Yes. Well, it strikes me that so many of what we would call kind of the classic spiritual disciplines or habits, whether that's taking time away from the crowd in solitude, whether that's just some of the simple boundaries that we're talking about here in terms of even technology, the idea of a Sabbath rest each week, all of those directly cut against, they violate the idea that everything depends upon me and my hard work and my achievement, right? Because they are essentially taking you out of action for either short periods of time or even longer periods of time, like a full Sunday would do, or even, a time of vacation every year. And they violate that, but ultimately that is teaching our soul, hey, it does not depend on us and our wisdom or our ethic or our labor. It really, ultimately, God is working even when we're not, and we can rest in that. We can take joy in that. We can see others move forward and rise as we pull back, and then ultimately, when we return from those spaces away, we have so much more to offer others.
Yeah, well said. And I think this is where leaders, individuals involved with organizations, the example matters. And so we have a real simple policy at Hope that is Sunday. Like, we better not see any emails going on that day, because that's not just impacting you and making it clear you're not having a time, but that's actually sending the wrong message to the organization. And so, just one simple practical thing is to make sure there is one day where there is not going to be that email traffic on that. And as a simple reminder, as you said, that this world it's not up to us to save it. There already is a Savior. It's not you and me, so we work hard, but we are not afraid to rest, trusting in God's goodness as well. So, that idea of a Sabbath rest, I think that is critical for the health, the vitality, and the reframing of the work that we do. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, I feel like, truthfully, I would have burned out a very long time ago if that hadn't been a part of my life. And it still is hard at times, just feeling like, I've got so much to do. I would feel more relaxed working than taking time off. And yet, as I, week after week seek as a spiritual discipline to carve that time out, it's such a gift, such a gift.
Yeah.
Well, Peter, as we wrap up here, just would maybe frame a final question: is if you're speaking to younger folks, young adults, students who are kind of at the front end of a journey of, they want to serve the Lord, they want to serve people in need and work of justice and mercy. What counsel would you give them, whether it's particular practices or rhythms that you would encourage they establish, or other things that you just encourage them to keep central?
Yeah. Oh, man. I mean, so much of what we've been talking about, don't wait until a moment of crisis to put these things into practice. Don't wait until you feel that this is a necessity. And, in some ways, I know there's been a lot of talk, and I'm so thankful for, Bob Buford and the halftime movement. But I guess my heart has always been, if those things are true, why wait until halftime? Why not put them into practice now? And in a similar way, if these things are true, and I believe that they are, the earlier you can put them into practice of having those boundaries, of having the spiritual health, of deep connection, of not letting your newsfeed be the first thought of your day, of having a Sabbath, all those things, they really do make an impact. And so the earlier you put them into practice, the better. So I love that on a personal so I guess the advice is don't wait. Put them into practice now. From a professional standpoint, I think that there is oftentimes this idea of, well, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. And there can oftentimes be this sense of disappointment if the right door doesn't open at exactly the right time. And I guess I would also encourage you, just be patient in that process. God is not wasting opportunities. Oftentimes we're hard to kind of see how they all fit together, and it's only in retrospect. But I would say that God's at work, and if you feel like you've got a job that isn't exactly in the sweet spot, do it well, learn everything that you can, engage, and trust that God is going to use even that season, even that time, for His purpose and His plans in you.
So good, Peter. Well, hey, brother. Loved having this conversation. Thank you. Personally, thank you. And thank you on behalf of all the folks who will, I think, draw wisdom from you as well.
It's such a privilege. Thank you. And love not just the work that you're doing, but how you are doing it. So, yeah, truly, truly awesome to have time with you.
what a tremendous conversation. And as we wrap up here, I just want to encourage you. If something has sparked in your heart, act on that. Don't wait. If it has to do with rooting for rivals, go ahead and put it into action, whether that's helping or aiding or cheering on someone who may be considered a rival to you. Or perhaps it is putting into practice one of the habits that enable us to become the type of person who is more able to root for rivals, whether that is having a weekly Sabbath in your life or governing the place of technology within your day. Or maybe it has to do with your commitments at home, to look more carefully at your travel schedule or your work hours, or to dare to ask your spouse some of the questions that Peter asked his wife. The choice is up to you, but I would encourage you, don't let the day end without having set something in motion, something that enables you to be the kind of person that 5 or 10 years from now is indeed known as someone who roots for rivals.
You've been listening to Justice and the Inner Life with Jedd Medefind, a production of the Christian Alliance for Orphans. To learn more about the Alliance, visit kfolk.org.